Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to say that I'd like to inform us that this webinar is being recorded and we will have time after the presentation for questions. I am Bamidele Osamika. I'm the Regional Climate Collaborative Manager at Green Umbrella. Green Umbrella is the Regional Climate Collaborative for Greater Cincinnati. We have been serving as a backbone of environmental and sustainability work in the Greater Cincinnati region for 25 years. Over the 25 years, we have connected hundreds of members, local governments, non-profit organizations, educational institutions, and businesses, as well as passionate individuals through our collective impact approach to tackling the most complex and pressing environmental challenges our community faces. This webinar series is titled Energy, Climate Change, and Health Outcomes in Greater Cincinnati. This one-hour webinar hopes to explore the connections between energy use and climate change and health outcomes. Our panelists will make a brief presentation followed by a Q&A. Then we will wrap up with the next steps and some announcements. Green Umbrella serves the 10-county region across the Southwest Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and Southeast Indiana. Myself, Nobi Kennedy, our Regional Climate Coordinator, Savannah Sullivan, and our Senior Director of Programs and Climate Strategy are the three primary members supporting our climate health equity work. Alongside our climate health fellows, Mitch Singer, a fourth-year medical student at University of Cincinnati Medical School, Leah Rose, medical science student at University of Cincinnati, an undergraduate medical student. With a previous change in Green Umbrella's identity from Regional Sustainability Alliance to a Regional Climate Collaborative, Green Umbrella joins more than 30 other collaborators across the country, all of them working all across jurisdictional climate action. And given our existing staff and our existing programs, our partnerships have been established over the past 25 years. Green Umbrella is now actually the largest regional climate collaborative in the country. One of the things we are most excited about is weaving our existing programming and resources into the regional climate collaborative model. The new framework allows us to build on all the work we've accomplished over the years with our members and partners as a sustainability alliance, while providing more impactful climate actions, tools, and resources locally. As the climate changes, our region becomes more vulnerable to high heat, air quality alerts, breeding of new pests, health crises, storms, flooding, and landslides. Addressing climate change can be feeling overwhelming at these times and requires hard work. But if we do this right, we can address social inequalities, secure exciting economic opportunities, create more resilient and equitable and thriving Greater Cincinnati. When we look at the type of work we do and what we lead and participate in, we see it as a collaborative work, as helping to reduce emission, build resilient and equitable food access, create and protect green space, support local community to take actions on their environmental and resilient priorities. It means that we will be on ground engaging communities, equipping local leaders, co-designing regional solutions, and mobilizing resources to turn ideas into actions and actions into impact. These efforts are all continuing, but with a more explicit focus on our programs areas like the Common Orchard Project, Green Space Alliance, Green Schoolyard, Food Policy Council, 23 District, and much more. The Climate Health Equity webinar, this webinar series was on recently completed report done in partnership with Scioto Analysis. To highlight the findings of this report and accelerate actions on the key related issues, we have released a public service announcement toolkit connected to the topics we're going to cover in this webinar series. And also, you can please visit our website and download and read full reports on these topics. The PSA will cover 11 climate health topics, one per month. It will provide data and shareable media materials every month. Additionally, the campaign will share actionable strategies at the individual, institutional, and system levels. This month's webinar covers energy, climate change, and health outcomes in Greater Cincinnati. We all know that through coal, oil, and gas production, billions of tons of carbon emissions are released into the atmosphere every year. Human activities are producing greenhouse gas emissions at a high recording rate, resulting in rising temperature. Energy use in the average home across America has doubled since 1973. Women and children and low-income households are more at risk of suffering from health effects related to the energy use. Then what can you do? What can institutions do? Individuals should know their energy sources and usage, reduce energy use consumption to save energy, and also to improve their home's air quality, replace their home electric appliance to more energy efficient ones, invest in energy efficiency infrastructures and programs and initiatives. Please find more information on our social media platforms on what you and institution can do to be more resilient towards the impact of climate change. At this juncture, we would like to introduce our guest speakers who will dissect this topic and provide answers to some of our questions. Our first panelist is Molly Robertshaw. Molly is a sustainability manager at the City of Cincinnati, Office of Environment and Sustainability. She came to municipal climate and energy work nearly 3 years ago after 2 decades in nonprofit and higher education leadership. Her training is community organizing and social change. She has a strong desire to use her professional strength to build a more just and equitable world. In her spare time, she enjoys cycling, gardening, and spending time with her kids and other family and friends. Our second panelist is Dr. Alison Knasin. Alison is the manager of the Energy Justice Lab, a collaboration between University of Pennsylvania and Indiana University. She received a Ph.D. in inorganic chemistry from the University of Pennsylvania and a Bachelor's of Art in Chemistry from the Boston University. In her role at the Energy Justice Lab, Alison manages all cloud-based operations of the lab and oversees all lab research and data management. Join me as I welcome Molly as the first presenter of presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Bamidele. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'll refrain from reintroducing myself and just ask that Nobi flip the slide and we can get started. So just to do some level setting, in addition to what Bamidele offered, I'm lifting I'm lifting a couple of key quotes straight from the report that he referenced, the Climate Health Equity Report, that relates specifically to our topic of energy today. So you can see here, energy use is a driver, a significant one, of greenhouse gas emissions and therefore climate change, impacting our ecosystems, infrastructure, and health in compounding ways. And then kind of more personally, so we know that energy use contributes to climate change, but it can also have negative effects on our individual health through the ways that our homes and our businesses are powered, whether that's heating, cooling, cooking, and the like. And those can be directly detrimental to the health of those in the building. I'm also going to steal the metaphor that was used in the blog relative to this topic. The blog is entitled "Save Your Energy: The Impacts of Indoor Energy Use on our Health." And you can imagine energy when it comes to climate change being represented by a snowball falling downhill. It grows larger as it falls, it accelerates in unpredictable ways, it destabilizes the area around it. So just like a snowball can lead to an avalanche, greenhouse gas emissions also lead to climate change. And those cascading effects are felt in our everyday life. They strain our infrastructure, they can disrupt our energy networks, and they can present risks to us as people. That is about as heavy as I think we're going to get today. I think we're gonna definitely trend towards action and hopeful notes, but wanted to at least connect the dots for everyone in the room about how energy impacts climate and health at a high level. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to spend a few moments just talking about where our energy comes from now and where it will come from soon. So that first question there, where does our energy come from? So first of all, anything I'm sharing with you today, you can see referenced there at the bottom, is coming out of our local state profile and energy estimates from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. So just know that that's kind of the primary source of the information I'm sharing. So where does our energy come from today? So in our region, as you very well may know, we mostly use electricity and natural gas. So we're going to talk a little bit in depth about where each of those comes from. I think most of us think that our electricity to cool our homes, to heat our homes, our appliances, our lights, not just our homes, also our workplaces, come from coal. And I would say one of the big transitions that we'll discuss today is that increasingly electricity is being produced from natural gas here in our state. So power plants are using natural gas and still some coal to produce 80% of the electricity used by Ohioans. Just to think a little more about coal, coal is also shipped on the Ohio River, and that flows just through our region because Cincinnati has one of the largest inland coal ports in our country. So coal is moving through here quite quickly. You may see it on the barges passing by. Ohio is also among the top 10 coal consuming states in the nation. And yet, natural gas is increasingly fueling the total net electricity generation in our state. So in 2022, natural gas supplied more than half of the state's power. So that's been an interesting shift, and we'll get into that more in a bit. But for decades, coal was the primary fuel for electricity generation in Ohio. All right. And so the other place that our energy comes from that I've already mentioned is natural gas. The vast majority of our homes and businesses locally are heated by natural gas. And Ohio is also one of the top 10 natural gas producing states in the United States. Most of our gas comes from fracking. And then we can't just talk about buildings when it comes to energy. We also need to think about our vehicles. And this is going to be a little more straightforward. Our vehicles are generally powered by diesel and gasoline, right? But increasingly, we're seeing electricity rise, both in the form of hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles. So all three of these original sources that I'm referencing here, coal, natural gas, and diesel and gasoline, are non-renewable, and meaning they are limited in terms of the amount we have to use here on this earth, and they produce a significant amount of greenhouse gases and air pollution. And so renewable energy, I do want to say a small portion of our energy comes from, at this time, about 4% of our region's current energy sources are made up by renewable sources. And most of that in our near vicinity comes from solar, but most of that from the state of Ohio context comes from wind energy from the Northwest region. I promise that was like the longest answer to question one. We'll keep moving here pretty quickly. So what sources are used for different functions? So for our homes, we mostly use natural gas, both for electricity and for heating, and some coal. And then naturally, for our vehicle use, most is diesel and gasoline. So that's your simple answer to question 2. And question 3, in terms of the now, is how is it produced and distributed? So this is going to be a big shift in the coming years. So I want to be sure to set the context for where we are now, because the next slide will jump into where we're headed. So as you can see from the diagram on the right of the screen, power is currently generated centrally. You see in the top left there, power generation. It's generally at a central natural gas or coal-fired plant. And then that power that's produced there is transmitted across utility-owned lines to the different types of buildings that we have. Typically, you'll see those grouped in the 3 ways that you see here: residential, commercial, and industrial. And then at each of those sites, the usage is tracked by meters, on-site meters. Most places have more than 1 meter. So what you see here is a centralized distribution of energy model, and this is how our energy system is built currently. But this design places control of our energy production and distribution in relatively few hands. It causes a great deal of pollution, and things are changing, and they're changing quickly. Next slide, please. So here you can see on the left some of a different version of what I just described, that centralized power distribution effort. So the first question I want to address in this case, in terms of what will our energy production and distribution look like soon, is what will it take to clean up our energy sources, meaning remove fossil fuels and replace with renewables in order to improve climate and health. So the short, high-level answer to that, as you might imagine, are an enormous amount of resources in terms of investment of dollars, and then an enormous amount, almost equal to that amount of resources in terms of cooperation and coordination. So where will our energy come from in this new model of production, distribution, and usage? Well, it'll come from a more diverse set of sources that are closer to where the energy is used. So this diversity of sources will likely still need to include fossil fuels like natural gas, but an increasing volume of renewables. We need some of these sources, such as natural gas and other options that industries are exploring right now, in order to ensure stability of our energy infrastructure and our systems. So our energy will come from an increasingly complex network, as you can see represented in this diagram, with an increasing amount of renewables, especially here locally in the form of solar with battery backup, and imported wind. So that third question there, what sources will be used for different functions? Increasingly, we see homes and other residences using primarily electricity that can increasingly be fueled by renewable energy. And then vehicles also primarily being fueled by renewable energy and in the form of electricity. So how the heck will it be produced and distributed? Well, a lot of that is still working itself out, but you can see here, it will be produced more locally in a more distributed fashion, meaning smaller amounts in more locations closer to usage rather than as much centrally. Not to say there won't still be utility scale production, but or centralized production will become less emphasized and production will be more distributed. On-site storage, meaning battery backup, will be really important, especially when renewables in places like our geography are dependent on solar. And we all know the sun doesn't shine brightly every day, and it certainly does not shine overnight. And we need ways to power our society during those hours where that is not the case. We will also need the meters in buildings to not just flow one direction in terms of measuring usage, but with on-site production of something like solar, we need those meters to turn the other direction. Luckily, we have local commitment from our utility company, Duke Energy, to work towards carbon neutrality by 2050. They have set some ambitious climate goals that give us hope that we will be able to work in a collaborative fashion to move towards a more distributed solution. So while we have currently 4% of our electricity generation in the form of renewables now, we expect that to jump dramatically in coming years. Next slide, please. So the good news is that this transition from the centralized fossil fuel heavy production is already happening. This transition is already underway, and you can see it represented here in the form of the types of resources used to generate our energy over time. So you can see that on this chart that U.S. electric power generation and emissions per the International Energy Agency, you can see the declining dependence on coal as the primary source nationally. And then in the chart on the left, you can see the decreasing prominence of coal in our electricity sources over time. And on the right, you can see a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions over time due to this shift. So you can see the increased prominence of natural gas and the decrease of coal already, starting as early as 2005. This particular diagram only goes through 2019, but if Nobi, you can switch to the next slide. We'll take an Ohio-specific look, and you can see this transition quite dramatically, especially since 2013 in Ohio, when our state began to move away from coal and to invest heavily in natural gas production for both electricity and gas generation. So this natural gas industry boom has been a great economic driver for the state of Ohio. I will say that natural gas is a cleaner fuel source than coal. So the impact on greenhouse gas emissions is positive. It is still a fossil fuel, though, which means it's still a primary contributor to carbon dioxide emissions and therefore human health issues. And the sources are finite. So like I said earlier, natural gas will likely need to remain an important part of our energy mix for years to come. But the hope is to grow some of the other production sources like solar. Next slide, please. Before I pass to Alison, I just want to be sure to cover a bit of an overview on outdoor air quality and indoor air quality, because that is the primary driver of health impacts when it comes to energy usage. And so know a couple of things about our local air. So per the American Lung Association, they do a state of the air report every year. Cincinnati is ranked as 32nd most polluted for ozone pollution and 12th most polluted when it comes to particle pollution. So the levels of ozone pollution and particle pollution that we see in Cincinnati harm the health of our residents, and particularly children, older adults, people who are pregnant, and those living with chronic disease. So both the ozone and particle types of pollution can cause premature death and other serious health effects, such as asthma, attacks, cardiovascular damage, and developmental and reproductive harm. Particle pollution can also be a driver for lung cancer. So the state of our region's outdoor air quality has either stayed static or gotten worse over the last few years. So that's an important baseline to understand and keep in mind when it comes to driving the connection between energy, climate, and health. Next slide, please. A subset of outdoor air quality is indoor air quality. So this type of air quality is impacted by our sources and uses of energy that we've already discussed, and what is chosen by a given household, or forced upon if you're not able to make those choices for yourself, are the choices of the appliances and the types of energy sources that your building uses and how those impact your health within a building and the quality of the indoor air. So this is a newer, more emerging realm of concern, but one that's getting an increasing amount of attention both locally and nationally. You've likely seen some of this in the news. In the graphic here, this is sourced from Energy Logic. You can get some basic clues as to why this issue is rising. Believe it or not, most of us spend 90% or more of our hours each day indoors, breathing the air that is indoors. And indoor air, because it's captured largely, can be 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. But on the bottom part of this chart, you can also see some of the various pollutants from both inside and outside the home that impact indoor air quality. So to highlight some, those would be some of the drivers of indoor air pollution are the local air quality. We discussed the particle and ozone pollution. All of our heating and cooling systems pull air in and out of the outdoor air into the indoor. And so there's always that exchange going on. The age and the components of the building itself make an impact, and the appliances and the products stored and used in the home also make a difference. So in the energy transition from fossil fuel-based sources to renewable sources over the coming decade plus, it's really important to consider impacts on both indoor and outdoor air quality as we connect climate, health, and energy. So now I'm going to pass to my colleague, Alison Knasin, to discuss the transition in greater depth.
Awesome. Thank you to the organizers, especially Bamidele and Green Umbrella, as well as Molly for teeing me up here, and for all of you for coming. If we could just scoot to the next slide, please. Awesome. So I'm going to kind of take a step back here, particularly because of my background and where I am now as manager of the Energy Justice Lab. So we view climate change and the energy transition actually in kind of a different light. So focusing more on equity and how is it dispersed and who has access. So to focus on the importance of equity, there are 3 pillars of justice that we have to satisfy to ensure that there is equity. So first of which is this green box or arrow, recognition justice. So this pillar is focused on recognizing human dignity and highlighting the differences between dominant groups in society, as well as other groups that are socially, politically, or geographically different. So this asks us as scholars or as residents of Cincinnati, who are the energy haves and have-nots? So if differently stated, who has abundant renewable energy sources, which communities, which states, which regions, which countries, or who has technologies to be able to harvest these energies? Next slide, please. The next pillar is procedural justice. So this focuses on the fairness in the processes surrounding these disputes, if there are any allocations of resources. So really like, how is energy being allocated? So this pillar asks us as scholars, again, who will be allowed to participate in these decision-making processes? Is it just senators? Which states have access, or which states are important in these conversations? How do we as residents become involved in these conversations? And finally, if we go to the next slide, the last pillar is distributive justice. And so this is focusing on actually the socially just allocation of resources within our communities, within our society. So this asks us two questions. The first of which is who has access, not only that, but who has access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable forms of energy, as well as who benefits from these new energy systems and infrastructures. For it to be fair, everybody has to benefit. And unfortunately, this isn't always the case. And if these pillars are not met, we have instances of what's called energy insecurity. Next slide, please. So a question you might ask is, first of all, what is energy insecurity? And this is when a household or a community cannot actually afford or support their energy needs or their energy burden. So the next question would be, how common is it? And in 2015, the Energy Information Administration put out a survey, and they asked households to answer a few questions. And I just want to pull out two of them. So of the respondents, very unfortunately, 31% reported difficulty paying their household energy bills, as well as maintaining adequate temperatures in their homes. So adequate temperatures, to define that, is being able to heat your home when it's cold, or be able to cool your home when it's hot, and be able to maintain a livable temperature. And additionally, as you can see here, 20% reported that due to these high energy bills that they had to pay, they had to forego paying other expenses that were necessary for their household, such as food. And this is in part due to multiple layers of vulnerability, and these aspects of vulnerability can actually cause somebody to become more or less energy insecure. Next slide, please. So like I alluded, vulnerability during the energy transition is multifaceted and multidimensional. So to kind of define who's vulnerable and what makes somebody vulnerable, there are these three different sections of vulnerability. So the first of which is exposure, then sensitivity, and then finally adaptive capacity. So if we go to the next slide, please. Exposure is all of these items. So it's if you live in an area where there are adverse climate impacts, if you're not in a region where there's access to decision making, if the utility rate designs are impactful and detrimental to being able to pay your utility bills, this can enhance energy insecurity. If you're living in a region where there's a toxic production facility and that's impacting your outdoor and indoor air quality, that's going to make you more vulnerable. And finally, job losses in the fossil fuel industries. So this is particularly of note as an example for people living where they used to produce coal. So a lot of these communities were really like not entirely about coal production, but a lot of these identities are actually related to these jobs. And so if they're no longer producing coal, at least to the same rate, people are losing jobs and they won't be able to find jobs at least to the same aspect in those regions. If we go to the next slide, we'll be able to see reasons behind increased sensitivity. So this is actually, if you're in communities that are defined as low income, if you're an indigenous community of color, related back to the coal production, so a rural community with a mono economy. So if you knock out that one singular economy, you're going to have issues finding other sources to boost your economy in your community. Additionally, households that have children, elderly, and those with compromised health. And finally, this blue region, adaptive capacity. To define this, this is the ability of an individual, a household, or a community to develop resilience and be able to adjust to climate risks. So this is a function of your resources. So what financial, technical, technological, educational, or community resources do you have as an individual available to you to be able to adapt to climate change, for lack of a better word? And so all of these things can either add or subtract to your vulnerability and make you either more or less susceptible to energy insecurity. And to kind of relate this back to health outcomes, if we go to the next slide, there are just a multitude of news headlines that have been in the news in recent years, talking about how energy insecurity can lead to negative health outcomes and death, actually. So on the top here, this family dying of gas poisoning after utilities cut power to their home. So this family was disconnected because they couldn't afford their energy bill, and to heat themselves, they went into their car. And I'm sorry, I know we said it wasn't going to be morbid, but unfortunately, they passed away of carbon monoxide poisoning. And so there are multiple instances of people either overheating or freezing to death because their utilities are being cut off, or they can't power their electric medical devices. So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight one study that the Energy Justice Lab actually conducted in 2022. And so this was a survey of energy insecure households, trying to gauge how people were managing their energy insecurity. And so as we can see here, there are a variety of coping mechanisms that these individuals and households actually did. And unfortunately, only less than 10% actually sought utility assistance or formal loans, which are available as members of communities. And instead, we're accruing debt or pursuing some risky temperature behaviors, such as burning trash to stay warm or keeping not unsafe temperatures in the home to be able to either heat or stay cool or stay hot. Okay, I'm going to switch gears and then I'll go back. So to go to the next slide, like Molly alluded, our homes have gas appliances, or can have gas appliances. It's not all of us have that. Some of us have electric. So to reiterate, these gas appliances, when we burn them, like stoves, furnaces, dryers, these can release particulate matter, like Molly had described, which is like dirt, soot, smoke, all of that. Gases, I am a chemist, so I'm going to say it. It's so carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, and nitrogen dioxide, as well as volatile organic compounds like benzene, hexane, toluene, which can really exacerbate respiratory conditions such as COPD, asthma, or anything that really is due to decreased air quality within our homes. And so this is why when we say that it's nice to be able to swap out gas appliances for electric appliances, particularly because, like Molly mentioned before, these electric appliances are slowly becoming powered by renewable sources. So we are coming off of that natural gas requirement and being able to use renewable energy such as solar or wind or anything that is not natural gas. So unfortunately, just to connect this back to the energy insecurity portion, this is not always possible to be able to electrify your home, because if it's too much of an expense, or if you're renting and your landlord makes all of those decisions, they might not focus on electrifying rather than leaving the gas material or gas appliances. But this is why the Energy Justice Lab is focused on equity in clean, safe energy and the energy transition itself. And I quickly wanted to allude to what Molly will be discussing on the next slide, but we actually have a really cool collaboration between our lab, the City of Cincinnati, and Green Umbrella. So I'm going to pass it back to her to chat about this this research project that we're all involved in.
Thank you, Alison. So we're gonna wrap up on and a hopeful, action-oriented note that gives everyone watching an understanding of some of the cool stuff that is going on to try to change the story that you have heard from us today. I'm going to start actually with the one in the middle because there is a lot going on with air quality monitoring in our region. One such collaborative is called RISE. RISE stands for Research Innovations Using Sensor Technology in Environmental Justice Communities. So RISE Communities is the project, and it's a partnership between Cincinnati Children's and UC's Department of Family and Community Medicine to install these air monitors, these purple air monitors that you see here all over the city. And it's a publicly accessible mapping and measurement tool that any one of us can jump on at any time to understand the air quality in any specific geography. As long as there is a monitor, you'll be able to understand what is happening. These simply get mounted onto any building, pole or the like, and then it just need to be connected to Wi-Fi in order to be able to, for the data to be able to upload into the system. So you can go to www.purpleair.com, put in Cincinnati, Ohio, put in a zip code, and very quickly see all of the different monitors that are starting to pop up around the city. The more we understand our air quality, the more we'll be able to advocate to change it. And so this and a handful of other efforts are looking to allow residents, you and me, to better understand the nature of our air quality. So please do jump in there and check that out. There are two other initiatives that I want to highlight, one of which Alison mentioned. The one on the left is the research collaborative that she mentioned that is through a grant from the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA's STAR program. And what we aim to do is, in partnership with Over the Rhine Community Housing, we're exploring whether energy efficiency and electrification of residential units can both reduce the burden of energy costs and improve the indoor air quality of these given residences. So we will be working with about 75 households over the coming couple of years to understand their usage behaviors, to understand the current appliances, the current air quality, the current usage within their households, and then make upgrades to those spaces and see how both the behaviors and the air quality and the costs start to shift for those folks. So it's going to be a wonderful learning opportunity that we're doing in partnership with residents in the Over the Rhine Community Housing portfolio of buildings. And so we're really excited to get going with that. I know Rachel, who's on this call, was out doing outreach related to that to invite residents to join us just yesterday. So it's getting up and going. And so we look forward to seeing what can happen with that and what we can learn and then scale. And then the other initiative that I want to point out has to do with some of what we were talking about when it comes to powering more and more of our buildings and our cars with electricity that can be sourced from renewables. So we have a young effort that is a collaborative coming out of our Office of Environment and Sustainability called Electrify Cincy. And it's basically a public and contractor education effort to do what we like to say, when it dies, electrify. So it doesn't make sense cost-wise or feasibility-wise to proactively replace our equipment. Very few of us can afford to do that. But when we have the choice, can choose an electric option that is as affordable or more so, we'd like everyone to start when And when it's dying, electrifying. So let's all adopt that mantra. You'll start to see a public-facing website come out in the next few months, and some additional resources to help residents in our region start to move in that direction. It can be a complicated process, and it can be kind of mystifying. So we're trying to break that down, make it easier for people to understand, make it easier for people to meet contractors that know what to do, just as our energy grid is starting to green, if you will. So those are a few really hopeful efforts that live in this space of energy, climate, and health that we wanted to be sure you knew about before we wrap up. I'll stop there and pass it back to Bamidele, I believe.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Alison, for those information and the resources. And also thank you for Charlie for those links in the chat. So they are really most helpful to us all. So this session, I want to go to the Q&A time. So we have few questions we'll be asking from our panelists. So and also I want to announce, if you have any question from the audience, please drop your question at the chat box. So we're going to have time to also trade that. So the first question I want to ask from Molly and Alison is, what can the members of the audience do to help? So, yeah.
I can try to start us off, Alison, if that's okay. So I think just reflecting on the fact that the vast majority of us live somewhere that has a roof, that needs heating, cooling, and the vast majority of us find our way around in a car, for better or worse. We all have access to choices. And similar to what I just ended with, when it comes to Electrify Cincy, the whole when it dies, electrify idea, just embedding that into your thinking, and trying, whenever you have a choice, to choose the option that allows for a greener future. And I know some of us have more choices than others, right? And that is a distinct reality. And I know that we have significant resources coming from the federal government via our state government here in the next year that should help more of us have choices in the form of reductions in cost for some of the equipment we're talking about, in order to do things like improve your indoor air quality and switch to electric appliances. So exercise your choice is kind of the first idea that pops to mind for me. How about you, Alison? Anything you would add?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Also, I would include raising awareness of some of these programs that Molly alluded to, so they are better known in the communities, as well as for lack of getting political, just go out and vote, because that will help.
Cool. Thank you for those responses. The second question I want to ask is, what policies are in place to help the energy insecurity and vulnerability?
I can start us off. So the federal government has programs such as LIHEAP, which is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which allows funds from the federal government to be used for paying energy bills. But also, if people reach out to their utility companies, there are usually some sort of discount models, as well as there's a cool program called Percent of Income Payment Program, which will actually give you allow people to pay a particular percentage of their utility rate based upon their household income. So this will allow people to stay connected to their utilities, while also managing the least amount of debt as possible. And then related to that, there are a decent amount of programs that will forgive your debt if you continue paying the percentage as possible.
Cool.
I would add that the city of Cincinnati has an evolving suite of programs that we call Warm Up Cincy, of which the Over the Rhine Community Housing Project is a part of. But we will have a couple more emerging efforts in the coming year or so, led by Rachel. I'm speaking for Rachel right now, that will allow landlords of low-income housing properties to improve their properties in different ways in terms of the energy efficiency, in an effort to reduce the energy burden faced by folks. So Warm Up Cincy is an evolution in evolution, and we look forward to bringing forward more of those options in the coming months. And then I would also add, just there's an extensive network of support nonprofit organizations that provide utility assistance to families who are in crisis or near, in order to cover both current and back energy bills. And so accessing those resources that are relatively underutilized is something that I would encourage everyone to consider.
Cool. Thank you for those answers. So I would like to ask Charlie now. We want to take a look at the chat box. Charlie, do we have like some questions from the member of audience?
So we have one question so far in the chat, but feel free, folks, to add some more in there if you have any questions. They were wondering how closely the city of Cincinnati is working on these green initiatives with neighboring cities in the metro area. I know this is relevant to the work that Green Umbrella collaborates with the city and on. So I'm not sure if Molly, you want to take it first, or if Bamidele, you want to have also remarks about this.
I'm happy to get us started. So the city of Cincinnati, as the largest municipality in our region, and the first to have what we call our climate action plan, we love to engage with other municipalities in the area, but until Green Umbrella stepped into leadership in this space, those opportunities for connection weren't as great as they are now and will become. And so we look forward to working more with our neighboring municipalities under Green Umbrella's guidance and leadership. So I'll pass to Bamidele in case he has more he'd like to say.
Cool. Thank you very much, Molly. So we have green initiatives around. So from Green Schoolyard program, Action Network, to a Green Space Alliance program, so to our 2030 district that helps the building to be more sustainable. So we around these programs, we're trying to step up all the green initiatives across board in the Greater Cincinnati to really make sure that we have more greener environment and also more resilient and an equitable region for everyone.
I might add really quickly that the city, as the city, we tend to collaborate more often in the energy space with other Ohio cities, simply because so much of the energy policy and programs are distinct to the states. So despite the fact that, you know, we're closer, like I could almost see Kentucky from my window, you know, we work with Dayton more because we fall under the same guidelines and requirements. And so I think there will still be plenty of opportunity to inform and support Kentucky municipalities, Indiana municipalities, and the like, because energy use is energy use, right? But at this point, those connections are very young.
And maybe I'll also just quickly share that as part of our collaborative work with the City of Cincinnati and OKI, we have where we've been working to expand the types of solutions and planning that the City of Cincinnati is a leader in to all the municipalities across Green Umbrella's 10-county region. So there's 188 municipalities in this 10-county footprint of Greater Cincinnati that we work in. And we have a lot of programming that we have developed and benefits that we're working with those different municipalities, including our inaugural Climate Fellows program, where we have a few of our climate fellows working with specific municipalities. But also with OKI, Green Umbrella has been working to develop a sustainability plan for the region, like a climate action plan called Thrive Together. And I'll put a link in the chat that has a little bit more information about that.
Thank you, Charlie. So we're working closely, just to add to that, we're working closely with other partners in the region. We have OKI, we have State of Cincinnati, we have other partners around the region that we're working on a regional sustainability playbook to really make sure that we have a lot of programs and projects that will help our region and also help us all to really more resilient and to reduce the impact or to address the impact of climate change. So on our climate safe neighborhood, we also have collaborations with other partners like Groundwork and other partners to really help and help the local community member to take actions on climate issues in their neighborhood. So like recently, we are on Bond Hill that trying to develop the parks and others. So presently we are on the climate safe neighborhood. So we are on the northern Kentucky trying to almost three cities there. Presently, we are working closely with folks to really ensure that they take action and also on climate efforts and also implement some policies regarding green initiatives. Do we have any question again, Charlie?
I don't see any other questions, and I know we only have a couple more minutes, so probably good to wrap up. And I know you had a couple other announcements to share.
Oh, cool. Okay, thank you, everyone. So moving forward, and let's endeavor to adopt these climate resilience strategies, including knowing your energy use and consumption and also the sources, and reduce the usage of the energy, and invest in energy infrastructures, energy efficiency infrastructures, programs, and initiatives. And as we wrap up, so we have a couple of announcements, and one of it is by April, so we are climate health equity webinar title is on flooding and health outcomes in Greater Cincinnati. So we also, by April 4th, so Green Umbrella, a member of the 2030 district, Green Umbrella members will be organizing their Happy Family Hour on building tour. So and you can just log into their website, to our website, and also look at our event calendars to register and participate in this if you are members of 2030 district. So by April 11th too, we also have workshops on circularity strategy and reducing waste, which is also meant for Green Umbrella members too. So we enjoy you that you join all these programs if you are members. The last one is a Midwest Sustainability Regional Summit, which is coming up by May 2nd. So the title is From Vision to Action. And our keynote speaker is Jacqueline Peterson, who is a founder and executive director of a Chisholm Legacy Projects. So the conference will feature a full day inspiration discussions and workshops with over 80 speakers. So there'll be exhibition and also art show and live performance and others. So to be more inclusive, so we also have a pay what you can option. So in case you want to use the opportunity, so learn more and also register to participate in this summit. And please visit our Green Umbrella online platforms to get engaged. Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you all. Thank you very much.